When you think of the American Revolution, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably brave patriots in those three-cornered hats, right? Fighting for liberty against a mean old tyrannical king. And look, that's the story we all know. But what if that's not the whole story? Not even close. What if the revolution wasn't just a war for independence, but a brutal, ugly civil war that literally tore America apart?
I mean, the traditional view is pretty black and white. You were either for liberty or you were a Tory, a loyalist, a traitor to the cause. This old election ticket from 1775 lays it out perfectly. It was us versus them. The good guy American patriots against the British and their sympathizers. Seems simple enough, right? But it wasn't.
Because for a huge chunk of the population, this wasn't simple at all. This quote, it's from William Franklin, and yeah, that's Benjamin Franklin's son. He was the royal governor of New Jersey and a die-hard loyalist. And just listen to his warning. He's not seeing some glorious fight for freedom. No, he's seeing all the horrors of a civil war. And you know what? He was absolutely right.
This wasn't some far-off war fought against a distant enemy. This was happening right on their doorsteps. It was a conflict that pitted neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother, and as we just saw, even father against son. The colonies were deeply and violently divided.
And this quote just perfectly captures the agonizing spot the Loyalists were in. Guys like Isaac Wilkins saw themselves as the real patriots. They loved America. It was their country. But they had also sworn an oath to their sovereign, the king. They were stuck in a totally impossible choice. Do you betray your king or do you betray your home? Wilkins chose exile. A lot of others, they weren't so lucky.
And yeah, if you chose the wrong side, well, the price you paid could be terrifying. For anyone who stayed and remained loyal to the crown, life pretty much became a waking nightmare.
So you had these so-called committees of safety, but they weren't about safety for everyone. They enforced loyalty with, let's be honest, an iron fist. If you refused to sign their oaths, you were declared an enemy of the people. The governor of Georgia described the tarring and feathering of one loyalist as a horrid spectacle. Another minister wrote about the unbridled fury of patriot mobs who threw people in jail or did much worse.
16. Let that sink in. That's how old Walter Bates was when a mob captured him. He was just a kid. And why? Not because of anything he did, but because his father was a loyalist. They threatened to tie him to a post and let him drown in the tide. When that didn't work, they tied him to a tree, stripped him, and whipped him 20 times. This wasn't some clean political disagreement. This was brutal, personal violence.
So, how on earth did it get to this point? What was the spark that lit this whole fire? I mean, we all learned in school it was about taxes, right? No taxation without representation. And yeah, that's part of it. But the real story, it's a bit more complicated.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. The trouble really kicks off right after the French and Indian War. Britain wins, which is great for them, but victory is crazy expensive. They're left with this staggering debt of £133 million, which was an astronomical sum back then. So to pay for it all, Parliament looks at the colonies. First comes the Sugar Act. Then, boom, the infamous Stamp Act, taxing literally everything printed. And to top it all off, the Quartering Act, which forced colonists to house and pay for the soldiers sent there to police them.
But here's the thing that really gets under their skin. It wasn't just about the cash. For over 150 years, Britain had this unofficial policy. They called it salutary neglect, which is basically a fancy way of saying they just left the colonies alone, let them run their own affairs. Imagine that. For generations, you're used to being independent. And then all of a sudden, bam, the rules totally change overnight. To Britain, it seemed reasonable. To the colonists, it felt like tyranny.
And this is where we get to the real heart of the debate. The question historians are still arguing about today. We get why the war started, but what was it really? Was this whole thing just about who gets to rule America? A war for political independence? Or was it something way, way more radical? Something that completely turned American society upside down?
All right, let's dive into that first argument, the idea that the American Revolution was actually, well, pretty conservative.
The historian Carl Diegler makes a really strong case here. Just look at who was in charge. The rich guys before the war, the wealthy landowners, the merchants, the lawyers, they were the exact same rich guys after the war. Washington, Jefferson, Hancock, these guys were the colonial elite. No new social class came storming in to take over. An incredible 89% of the Patriot leaders in office before 1774 were still in office after. Unlike, say, the French or Russian revolutions, there was no massive reshuffling of society. It was more like a change in management, not a complete overhaul of the company.
But then you have a totally different take on it. This side, championed by the historian Gordon Wood, says, whoa, hold on, you're missing the real story. They argue that behind the politics, this was one of the most radical social revolutions in modern history.
For Wood, the real revolution wasn't on the battlefield. It was in people's minds. It just completely shattered that old world, the one built on hierarchy, on deference, on knowing your place. And it replaced it with this wild new idea that regular people and their prosperity, their pursuit of happiness, should be the entire point of government. That thinking unleashed this wave of social and commercial energy that turned America from a sleepy colonial outpost into the most modern and democratic nation on Earth.
Okay, so let's just put these two ideas right next to each other to make it super clear. You've got the conservative view, it's a political divorce from Britain, but the American family structure socially and economically pretty much stays the same. Then you have the radical view. It's a social earthquake that completely remade the landscape, changing how people related to each other forever.
Now, if you really want to get the radical argument, you have to wrap your head around one single, powerful word: dependency. In that old monarchical world, everyone was dependent on someone above them, a tenant on a landlord, an apprentice on a master, a colonial governor on the king. This whole web of personal obligation was just how the world worked. And the revolution? It basically declared war on that entire idea.
And man, this quote from John Adams just nails it. It's like a bomb going off in that old world. In one sentence, he just erases centuries of complicated hierarchy. It's a binary choice now. You're either a freeman or you're a slave. There's nothing in between. And that wasn't just talk. It was a roadmap for a whole new kind of society.
So this brings us full circle. Back to our big question. When we strip away all the myths and the schoolbook stories, what was the American Revolution really all about?
So, which one was it? Was it a clean political break led by an elite who just wanted to be their own bosses? Or was it a messy, radical explosion that destroyed an old world of aristocracy and created a new one, built on the promise of equality for the common person? The way you answer that, well, it says a lot about not just our past, but about who we think we are right now.